Let's spend some time understanding how you'll paint time with musical notes. The Ableton Push 2 is an incredible tool, controller, sequencer, and all-in-one DAW interface. But it's also an amazing and unique musical instrument in its own right. It gives you hands-on control of melody, harmony, beats, samples, sounds, and song structure. I really want to create a thorough exploration of music theory, but paying special attention to the interconnectedness of all of these concepts that we'll be covering. As we continue to move forward, I really want to take a step back and take the time to really integrate and internalize all of the concepts we learn and how they connect to all the other concepts that we'll be covering, so that you can actively use it in your music and you can understand music at a deeper level. Humans are storytellers. Everything we know as ourselves and about ourselves are based around the stories we tell ourselves and the stories we've heard. We're not only physical matter, nor the vibrations that hold it all together, nor just biological intelligence. We are the imaginative story that bridges the gap between the interaction of all of our senses, our perception, our thoughts, our emotion, the physical body. So similarly to the story we tell with our music, we can ask ourselves, what story are we telling with the relationship of these different human instruments that are playing together? With music, you can really feel it, which makes it a very compelling way to tell a story. You'll be able to come up with more ideas and different ideas than you'd ever usually come up with. You'll be able to work faster. You'll be able to express and capture ideas and materialize them into your music. It is magic. All right, so what is music theory? We definitely touched on this a little bit in the previous video, so if you haven't checked that out, I'll link it in the card above. But basically, it's the language behind music. It gives you the tools to understand, interpret, and communicate about music. Music is exactly like a language. There's a rhythm and a cadence to how we speak. There's different dialects around the world, and most likely you can speak a language very intuitively without having to think about it. It's second nature. It's how you make sense of the world. It's how you express yourself. It's how you connect and interact with others. This is important to remember. You don't have to consciously think about the language you speak. However, sometimes you come across a new word or two and integrate it into your vocabulary. So language has syntax, grammar, and proper sentence structure, and music has chords, rhythm, melodies, and how those work together with keys, chords, and scales. And as you'll continue to see over and over again, the study of music is the study of relationships. All right, so I have the Push 2 loaded up here, and the first thing is that all notes equal sounds, okay? So each specific note that we hear on a Push 2, on a piano, on a guitar, is a specific sound that our ear can recognize. Everything is vibration, man. Real talk, have a look into that. On the note of vibration though, our ears are really good at detecting vibrations. So a pitch that we can detect with our ears is a frequency which equals a specific note. When somebody hits a guitar string, it creates a vibration. And when that vibration hits our ears, we hear a distinct note. We're really good at detecting ratios. We are basically pattern recognizing machines. So when a vibration is halved or doubled, we hear the same note. It's actually crazy. So for example, if I play a C note here, you'll recognize that as a pitch, right? You can distinguish it between other notes, say this one, right? Sounds different. However, if I play the same note one octave higher or one octave lower, I'm effectively doubling or halving the pitch, all right? The frequency of the note that we're hearing is going twice as fast or half as fast, but you can hear that this is the same as this, or that this is the same as this. These are all the same note, but we're just doubling the frequency every octave we move up, and we're halving the frequency every octave we move down. So there are specific ratios that explain why certain notes sound good together or sound more stable together, different intervals, and we'll go into that later in the video. Let's talk about the Push 2 as an instrument. So it's a cool combination of guitar, piano, but played in a rhythmic way by hitting pads. If you're still learning how to use Push 2 and wrapping your mind around it, I've created a Learn Push 2 in 20 minutes video, so I'll link it in the card above. If we look at the Push 2 in chromatic mode, it's the same tuning layout as a guitar or bass neck. It's tuned in fourths. So what do I mean by that? Is that each subsequent row moving upwards is 1/4 higher. It's a perfect fourth higher for the starting position. So moving up from the C note is a perfect fourth relationship no matter where you are on this grid. And that's typically how you'll see the neck of a bass guitar tuned. Each of these strings are tuned 1/4 higher than the previous string, giving you a kind of grid layout similar to what you see on the Push 2. However, the Push 2 also gives you visual feedback about your sharps and flats similarly to a piano. We have our white keys or our white pads, and we have our black keys or our dimmed pads. Finally, this is very much a percussive instrument. You just have to tap a pad to play a note, similar to how you play a piano. You just have to push down a piano key to make a note versus a guitar or a bass where you have to pluck a string and fret a note. By default, every note on Push 2's grid will be in C major, and don't worry, you can totally play with this later. And the bottom left pad plays C1, okay? And we can change this by moving up or down an octave here. So I can click up, now we're playing C2, back down to C1. Moving upwards, each pad is a fourth higher, like I explained earlier, and don't worry, we'll get more into intervals and what a fourth is and how to use it, all that great stuff. But if we go from C up here, we go to C to F, and F to B flat, and so on and so forth moving upward. And just a quick heads up for this series, we will be working in chromatic mode because I do feel that it is a better tool in chromatic mode. It's a more versatile instrument, and we will be doing a complete walkthrough of all the basics of music theory, but paying special attention again to the interconnectivity of each concept, and most importantly, how you can explore it in your own music in a practical way. Just in case you want to play with it, you can hit the scale button here and hit this button up here to change from in key to chromatic mode, okay? In key mode, in C major, which is the scale we have selected, all of these pads represent the white keys on the piano, but you'll notice we don't have access to the black keys, okay? So you can actually play any note on this pad grid and it will be in C major. It can be cool for jamming if you're still learning stuff. But if we go to chromatic mode now we still have access to the whole scale. However, we also have access to the notes outside the scale. In key mode with C major selected, to play a C major scale on Push 2, you want to play the first 3 pads in the first row, then move to the next 3 pads in the next row upwards, and so on until you hit C again. So if you wanted to play it from here, you would do the same thing, these 3 pads, move up 3 pads, again, until you hit the root note again. All right, but we're gonna move to chromatic mode, and in this mode, you'll see that there are now notes in between what we just played. However, we're gonna follow the same concept to play C major in this mode. You're gonna play 3 pads on one row, then move up and play the next 3 pads until you hit C again. However, this time, we're just gonna follow the pads that are lit up. All right, so if we're starting on C here, we're gonna play 3 pads by hitting the lit up notes. Then we're gonna move up to the next row and play 3 more pads. And then once again, move up until you hit that root note once again. A little side note is you can actually play around with the layout of the pads of Push 2. However, we'll be using chromatic mode tuned in fourths for most of the series, but I invite you to explore these different layouts. So you can actually lay this out in thirds and notice how all of the patterns change, right? Now these rows are tuned thirds apart instead of fourths apart. You can also move over to sequential mode, which will give you all of the notes repeated without a distinct tuning between the rows. So we're just going to continue to move up notes all the way up the pads. You can also change the direction and change this to horizontal, which basically flips the whole pad grid 90 degrees, and we would be looking at it like this now. So we would be playing our C major like this, which could be fun to play with if you're feeling adventurous. And another handy feature that I actually just discovered, but I'm going to play with definitely, is this fixed button. And we put fixed on. Now, regardless whatever scale I change to in this scale selection, the pads will still play the same notes. So this can be very handy if you really start internalizing where the notes on these pads are without them constantly shifting and changing depending on your scale selection. So for example, if I move over to Lydian, let's go to Phrygian, E flat Phrygian. Okay, wow, that's totally different. I can see where the root notes of E flat are, all these darker pads. We're in Phrygian, I can see the lit up pads in the scale. However, the layout of this pad grid is still with C1 here. So I can still play C major by playing this. Right? But I just have the visual feedback of the scale mode that we're in. So that can be super handy if you want to train yourself to internalize this instrument to the next level. All right, I'm going to go back to C major. If you're interested in learning more about how to produce your own radio-ready music with tools such as the Push 2 in your home studio, I've created a super easy to follow 7-step framework that walks you through the whole process. So if you're interested in learning more about that, you can find it in the description below. Let's talk about the mother scale, all right, C major. And the reason why I like to call this the mother scale is because by learning this scale and the intervals within it, we can then adapt and change all of the information we learn about this scale to create pretty much any other scale. It's one huge concept that unlocks many other concepts very easily. So let's talk about a scale. What is a scale? Well, a scale is a collection of tones that normally climb an octave in a certain number of steps, and it's usually 7. Most of the beautiful and diverse scales around the world owe a huge part of their creation to the overtone series and use the 5th as the first tuned note as the foundational structure. And the way that C major is constructed is by stacking fifths. All right, so if we look at our root note, which is C, a perfect 5th interval is going to look like this. It sounds very stable, very at home, very strong, very foundational. And one advantage of using Push 2 is that this interval shape will always be the same. So no matter where you are on this grid, this shape will always be a perfect 5th interval between each other. And the way that C major is constructed is that we continue to stack fifths on top of this, right? So if we add a 5th on top of this, it's going to look like this over here. And we get this new note, right? So all the notes of C major can be found if we stack fifths. And this is the core foundation of how scales are built. The way that I see the scale is that it's the stage for melodic drama to unfold. And without diving into the whole harmonic series and overtones and how we got to these intervals, the foundational intervals of a major scale are the 1, the major 3, or just 3, and the 5, and then the octave once again. And the 1, the 3, and the 5 create that major chord that we've all heard a million times. And the reason why this major chord sounds so strong is that the intervals that make this up are created by the overtones of ratios between frequencies. All right, so like we covered earlier, a 2-to-1 ratio is an octave. All right, so this octave and this octave will have a 2-to-1 ratio between their frequencies. So this one will be twice as fast as this one, and this one will be half as fast as this one. What would another ratio give us? Well, a 3-to-1 ratio will give us that perfect 5th up here. Okay, and this frequency is 3 times as fast as this one. Starting to make sense? The next ratio would be 4-to-1, right? 4 times as fast as this. Well, what would that be? Well, it would just be double of our octave, right? Another octave. Here's where things get interesting. If we move up to the ratio of 5-to-1, so 5 times as fast as whatever reference note you're talking about, in this case it's C. So what would be 5 times as fast as this? So we know that twice as fast is the octave, 3 times as fast is that perfect 5th, 4 times as fast is that 2nd octave, and then the 5-to-1 is that major 3rd. All right, so that's 5 times as fast frequency-wise as this root note. And just a quick side note, the 3rd interval in a scale or chord will usually dictate its quality being either major or minor. Side note for some of the more nerdy ones among us is that many of the 5 and 7 note scales use the same structure of stacking these ratios as a foundational structure to how they're built. And one of the fundamental structures for how these ratios are stacked is what is called the pentatonic scale. So that would be the 1, 2, 3, 5, 6 octave. And from there, you add a few notes, you change a few intervals, and voila, you have like all the scales that exist. Another thing I want to share as we're learning about intervals and ratios and relationships and really starting to set the foundation of understanding music theory and just sound theory in general is the idea of the paradox of the musical octave. And that sounds like crazy, but this blew my mind once I saw this. All right, so I'm going to include a picture of some sort of paradoxical thing so you understand what I'm talking about visually. But if we move up a scale or down the scale, we are simultaneously departing and returning somewhere. All right, we're coming and going at the same time. And you might ask yourself, what the hell are you talking about, Alex? Well, if we look at this perfect fifth interval, all right, we know this one, and don't worry, we're going to get into more intervals and dive deep into each of them as we continue on this theory. But for now, we have our root note and we have our perfect fifth. It sounds stable, right? And it looks like this, no matter where we play it. Okay, so we have a perfect fifth. And if we play up our major scale, we're going up towards back home to C, because we started at C, right? And then we're back home. It feels at home. And in doing that, we've traversed through the fifth, going upwards, right? But what happens if we play the same scale going down, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1. Right? We're still starting on C and ending at C. However, the trajectory is different, because if we look at this shape now, right? The same shape going up, going down is a different interval, right? This isn't the fifth. So moving downwards, we're doing the same journey. We're starting at C and we're coming back home to C, right? But if we look at this perfect fifth interval shape and we transpose it to when we're moving downwards, we're getting a different interval. So that means that a perfect fifth inverted is a fourth. So as above, so below. Anything moving up will equal its opposite moving downwards to equal the total of a whole octave. Mind blown. Key and scale are often used interchangeably, but let's say that a key is a group of notes that a song is based on, and a scale is a set of notes that you would play in conjunction with that. A lot of times you'll play a scale that matches the key you're in, but sometimes, depending on the flavor or the style or the genre you're working with, you might use a different scale over your open key. Let's talk about notes. There are only 12 notes, which is all we have to learn. It really simplifies it, doesn't it? The vast majority of music is made with these 12 notes, at least with Western music theory, which most music uses. However, there are different tuning systems around the world, of course. However, as a culture, we've discovered and agreed that these notes and the way they relate to each other sound good. All right, so the notes are named A, B, C, D, E, F, G. All right, so we use those letters of the alphabets, and they're represented by the white notes of the keyboard, or all of the C major pads on push 2. All of the black keys on the push 2 use the same notes but are either sharp or flat. So sharp means higher and flat means lower. The same notes repeat themselves higher and lower. So again, this is C, this is also C, this is also C, this is also C. Those same notes are called octaves. So the distance between this note and the next note over, this pad and the next pad, is what is called a half step or a semitone. And the distance between this pad and skipping one step to the next pad over, a distance of 2 half steps, is what is called a whole step or a whole tone or just a tone. So all music is built on the relationship between these notes. However, most music only uses 7 of these notes because there's only 7 notes in both major and minor keys. Check out the next video in the series where we'll dive deep into the relationship between these notes, the intervals.